Welcome back to another weekly dose of aviation. These people standing too close to an Airbus A320 taking off from Skiathos, Greece. Luckily, no one was injured and everyone could laugh it off afterwards. This Cessna Citation approaching a runway without landing gear, then at the last second going around. According to the comments on the video, this was an ILS calibration flight. This aerobatic display in Iceland, seen from the pilot's perspective.
Manchester Airport is the third busiest in the UK. It sits on 1,400 acres of land and services flights to 199 destinations. Like all airports, they do everything possible to keep birds and animals off the runway, but one always manages to sneak on. On April 29th of 2007, a Boeing 757 was preparing for a flight from Manchester to Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. As it sped down the runway, a pair of herrings flew into the plane's path. They got caught in the engine, causing it to spit giant flames. A plane spotter who was filming nearby caught the entire incident on camera.
517 at Delta Zulu, cross runway 06 left, taxi Delta 3.
Cross 06 left, taxi Delta 3 and 517.
Mayday, 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 Thompson 253 Hotel, engine failure. We are continuing with northwesterly and then inbound towards Wallasey.
Thompson 263 Hotel, roger. All runways available for landing, surface wind 070 degrees at 5 knots.
Thankfully, none of the 221 passengers were injured when their plane struck the birds. The pilot quickly issued a mayday call and shut down the starboard engine. The flames you see are not because the engine caught fire. They're coming from the roasted herrings stuck inside. The pilot dumped their excess fuel and quickly turned the plane around. They landed safely back at Manchester Airport, and the passengers grabbed another flight to Lanzarote a few hours later. A spokesperson for Manchester Airport said plane engines are built to deal with bird strikes. But since this case involved two large herrings, they couldn't recover.
At Skiathos again, this Airbus A320 shows how low the planes pass over people while landing at the airport.
On April 29th of 2023, the Carnival Dream was on the last leg of an 8-day cruise. Suddenly, an elderly passenger began experiencing heart attack-like symptoms. At the time, the cruise ship was about 300 miles south of Fort Morgan, Alabama, on its way to Galveston, Texas. The medical staff did everything they could, but the elderly man needed a hospital ASAP. So, they called the Coast Guard for an emergency air rescue. Unfortunately, the weather didn't make rescuing this man any easier. Just as the helicopter was getting ready to land, the weather took a turn for the worse. Rain and lightning pelted the area. Not only that, but the rough waves made landing on the moving ship even more difficult. The pilot could hardly hold his bird steady. Then, he nearly plunged into the Gulf of Mexico. The helicopter had no choice but to abort the mission. They returned to base due to the weather, and everyone had to wait for conditions to calm down. Once they did, another rescue chopper arrived and airlifted the man and a nurse to the nearest hospital. Though there's not much available about the elderly man, we believe he made a full recovery. You've probably seen this video making the rounds on social media. On May 26th of 2023, an Airbus A321-200 was moments away from landing at Daegu International Airport in South Korea. It had taken off from Jeju Island about an hour before. Apparently, one of the passengers needed to get off ASAP. As the plane approached the tarmac, a South Korean man grabbed the emergency door and opened it. Frightened and confused passengers tried to stop him, but they were too late. All it took was a tiny crack and the door flung open. Prepare to have a new irrational fear unlocked. The man said he felt suffocated and needed to get off quickly. Apparently, jumping 700 feet to the ground was his idea of a safe landing. A few passengers fainted, while others had trouble breathing. They were taken to the hospital when the plane finally landed. According to police, the man had just lost his job and was dealing with a ton of stress. Thankfully, the plane wasn't at cruising altitude when he opened the door. If it was, those sitting nearby would have literally been ejected into the sky. The temperature would plummet to frostbite-inducing levels, and the plane would possibly even break apart. After this incident, South Korea's Asiana Airlines stopped selling seats next to the emergency exit. From a pair of birds flying into a Boeing 757 engine in Manchester, England, and a risky mission in the Gulf of Mexico that almost crashed a Coast Guard helicopter, to a nervous Korean man who opened the emergency exit as his plane was landing, and a military plane in Australia that narrowly missed a high-rise office building. Here are 10 of the scariest aviation moments of all time.
This time-lapse showing what a solar eclipse looks like from 14,000 feet in a motor glider. This C-5 Galaxy taking off from a wet runway with its engines screaming. If you want to see more, subscribe and click the video on the screen to watch another episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We hate to break it to you, but that's not always true. On December 12th of 2020, 41-year-old Alejandro Carlson learned what happens in Vegas usually goes viral on social media. It was about 1:30 p.m. A plane was taxiing along the runway at McCarran International Airport when the passengers noticed someone on the wing. According to police, Alejandro jumped the fence and climbed onto the plane. What ensued was a 45-minute standoff between police and Mr. Carlson. It looked like a pretty rough fall, but Alejandro was okay. He was treated for some small cuts and a broken nose. He was eventually booked into county jail for trespassing. Police said Alejandro admitted to being mentally ill. He claimed he had a story to tell and believed jumping on the plane would give him a bigger audience. Hopefully, he got the help he needed. Halim International Airport serves two major purposes in Jakarta, Indonesia. Other than servicing commercial flights, the Indonesian military and president use it for their personal needs. So, when a cargo plane skidded off the runway in 2021, you can bet everyone was on high alert. On March 20th of 2021, a Trigana Air Boeing 737 cargo plane was trying to take off when something went wrong with the right-hand main gear. Unfortunately, they were already 3,000 feet in the air and had to make an emergency landing.
Wah, gesrot, Rick, gesrot, Rick. Gesrot, gesrot. Gesrot, gesrot. Gesrot, Rick. Wah, nggak bisa terbang, Rick. Wah, hilang gesrot. Gesrot, gesrot.
The cargo plane was going to Makassar, Indonesia, a relatively short 2-hour flight. Not wanting to risk anything, they turned around and tried to land back at Halim International. But landing isn't easy when one of your gears isn't working. The gear collapsed and the plane skidded off the runway before finally stopping. Thankfully, all 4 crew members were okay. Their plane, though, was in rough shape. The airport had to shut down for 24 hours while they sorted everything out. Sand and dust storms are pretty common in Saudi Arabia. They usually happen in the summer or during rough weather. For example, the transition between winter and spring can trigger them. Strong winds pick up sand, dust, and other particles, causing low visibility. As you can imagine, flying through one isn't a walk in the park. On November 30th of 2017, an Airbus A380 was taxiing down the runway when the sandstorm struck. Visibility dropped to 0. But that wasn't about to stop this pilot.
It's quite scary to think we're taking off from there, eh?
Things cleared up once the plane punched through the storm, though we imagine everyone on the plane was more anxious than usual. This video is a great example of trust and training. Since the pilot couldn't see, they had to rely on all their skills and communication with ATC for a safe takeoff. But maybe they should have just waited. Visibility can drop to 0 during a dust storm. Particles ingested into the engine can cause them to lose power or fail. If any sand slips into the cockpit, it can cause problems with the electrical equipment. Well, that's all we have for you today, but if you enjoyed this video and want to see another just like it, then be sure to click the link on screen now. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.